But Bert, let's get to the meat of the program here and talk about what's on the ballot in the states of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Florida, because that's primarily where our offices are and most of our members reside. And there are things going on that we should talk about that are going to have an implication on the workplace.
Absolutely.
So
Let's dig into
let's
it.
start in the Sunshine State of Florida, Bert.
Yeah, so in the Sunshine State of Florida, they are now considering recreational marijuana use. Remember, we did that here in Missouri a couple of years
We
ago.
have started with Illinois, then Missouri. We have in Florida. I can tell you, in Indiana, they have no appetite for that in the legislature. There, it's not on the ballot. They already do have in Florida medical use, right? That seems to be the trend. You go from medical to recreational is how most states have gone. But that is a big issue. So we may be on the road to Florida to do our indicia training program there.
That's exactly right. So people haven't had a chance to experience that training here in St. Louis. Let Phil know, and we can get that on the calendar again. Also for our folks in Illinois, you may be interested in that as well. And so under this legislation, it would legalize recreational marijuana for adults 21 older in Florida, allow possession of up to 3 ounces of marijuana, and authorize medical marijuana treatment centers and other licensed entities to cultivate, process, sell, and distribute marijuana products and accessories, and allow potential restrictions on smoking locations. So again, that indicia training will be very important down in Florida.
So, I was down in Florida during Hurricane Helene. And we got stuck there, and so I got a chance while the power was on to watch some television, and there was commercials for and against legalizing marijuana. And excuse me, my favorite commercial was the one it had it had the typical stereotype of a marijuana smoker. I'll let your imagination determine what that is. Was typical stereotype. And he was preparing his garden to grow his marijuana. And sitting next to him was your typical bureaucrat, and he's sitting in his lawn chair laughing and giggling, and they asked him, what's going on? And then basically he said, if you think we're going to let you grow your own, you're crazy. This bill doesn't let you grow your own. We're going to control all of it so we can control the taxes and revenues, this and that. And then the guy says, well, then I'm voting no. It was just this outrageous commercial. It was so funny in that sense, but just a little bit of humor as we go along with it.
On that point, the tax revenue projected to be generated by this bill in the state of Florida is over $4 billion in 2025.
And that, just a little fun fact is we spend about $3 billion on Halloween candy in America each year. So that in one state, in the tax revenue for marijuana, $4 billion, more than the entire country's Halloween spend in 1 month. So good stuff.
Crazy.
What else do we have, Bert?
All right, let's shift over. That's all that's pending in Florida that could affect the workplace. Let's shift over to Missouri. We have one that could have some pretty dramatic impact on the workplace here. Proposition A, and Proposition A would increase Missouri's minimum wage. Starting January 1, 2025, the minimum wage would be increased to $13.75 with yearly increases of $1.25 per year until it reaches $15 per hour by January 1, 2026. So $13.75 next year, $15 January 1, 2026. And after that, adjustments would be based on a cost of living increase. If the federal minimum wage ever exceeds the state rate, the higher federal rate would apply. The position also exempts public employers from certain minimum wage increases. So that's the first piece of this legislation. The second piece of this legislation is very similar to what Illinois has done in the past, and that is the legislation will allow Missouri's employers to or Missouri voters to decide whether employers must pay employees or provide employees earned paid sick time moving forward. And so again, this piece of legislation, it deals with minimum wages, paid sick time, and paid sick time would accrue at a rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. It would begin accruing for existing employees on May 1 of 2025 or the first day of employment for employees hired after that date. Employees with 15 or more employees may limit an employee's use of paid sick time to 56 hours per year. Employers with fewer than 15 employees may limit an employee's use of paid sick time to 40 hours per year. So also very similar to the Illinois law that went into effect, there is going to be a mechanism for front loading this time for basically allowing the employees a bank of leave at the beginning of their employment. There's also going to be an accrual method that employers can use. Also, the employers must allow employees under this proposed legislation to carry over at least 8 hours. Oh, something happened to my lighting. More.
Happy Halloween.
System here, Phil. So there's a carryover provision that allows employees to carry over at least 8 hours of unused paid sick time from year to year. I see in our chat here we have a question that if this passes, and do you believe we will still need to provide carryover or pay out at the end of the year? So again, the carryover is set at least 8 hours per year, but you do not need to pay that time out at the end of the year under the piece of legislation.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because, the sick time, it talks a little bit about it, but it seems to focus more on the minimum wage. And, for me personally, I mean, I'm stuck on this one, right? It's I want people to make as much money as they can when they work. And I want to, have reasonable, manageable inflation over time. And those two things really create often contrast for each other. And doing all the compensation work we see, it's amazing the compression that has occurred in the last 4 years between the entry-level worker, their supervisor, their manager, and then up the line. And some people might like that. Some people may say, well, we should all, more of a socialistic view, and it should just be, more balanced. But there doesn't seem to be that reward process also for people to move into higher level positions of responsibilities without creating additional wage increases that are creating inflation challenges. And then you have, employers, and you and I chatted about this yesterday, that, some of these positions, I'll call them, they're not really intended to be career-oriented positions, or at least in the way that Phil Brandt thinks about it. Like if I work at McDonald's as, the French fry cook, or, I'm serving the drive-through, I don't see that as my career. I'm used to that being something that that you do while you're working part-time towards something else in your career. And some people choose to do it for a long time, and they do it for many, many years, but I see it more as a part-time type role. I have lots of flexibility. My schedule kind of comes and goes based upon, who else is available and what my availability is. And there's a lot of collaboration in that. And now to think you're going to have sick time paid with that, I don't know that that is going to help us manage inflation. Of course, I want people to be paid. I want people to be looked after when they're ill. But I'm not sure. There's a lot of mixed emotions about the impact of this. Not necessarily for that one worker who's going to get sick time because they were off today due to whatever the illness is. But the impact it has for restaurants, retail, locations that, really aren't intending to, they're trying to manage their cost constraints. I'm rambling here a little bit, but that's because I have so many mixed emotions in my head about it.
Yeah, it's a tough issue. This will probably hit the restaurant, retail, hospitality sector harder than any other sector, because those are hourly, typically lower paying jobs. And if you don't work, you don't get paid. If you don't work, you don't have sick time. You just simply don't get paid. You're generally allowed the time off unless you're like a no-call, no-show, or the attendance becomes a problem. You're constantly calling off. But a lot of employers in those sectors do not provide sick time. And so what this law would do is it would provide sick time. It also would increase the minimum wage. And so, you just have to balance trying to provide a good wage rate for those people in that sector, in those sectors, but also what that might do to prices and inflation. And then my biggest concern related to it is we're just going to continue to see automation and employers doing more with less. You'll see fewer people working at a retail store. We already know sometimes how hard it is to find people for, when you need assistance in one of those stores. And it's a tough issue all the way around.
It is. And I don't want my comments to be misunderstood that, I don't have compassion or empathy or even a fair perspective of the retail and or restaurant industry. I think I understand it very well, but we're talking about really changing the game and how benefits and pay is provided, and that's going to have implications way beyond the few industries that already are not doing that or aren't doing these things that will need to start doing these things if they pass. But in the end, I want everyone to have a good set of benefits and a fair program. I think much of that depends on the industry you choose and the profession you work in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
All
so
right, Bert, what else do we have?
That's what we have here in Missouri. Illinois, they're taking an interesting approach. They have some advisory questions on the ballot.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
Advisory questions.
that's an interesting mechanism that they use over there that I think just passed fairly recently, that they can get the advice of their citizenry about things that the legislature might want to consider passing. And so they have 3 advisory questions on the ballot. The first is, should any candidate appearing on the Illinois ballot for federal, state, or local office be subject to civil penalties if the candidate interferes or attempts to interfere with an election worker's official duties? Think about the challenges to the last presidential election.
Yeah.
And so just keep that one in mind. How about this one? Should the Illinois Constitution be amended to create an additional 3% tax on income greater than $1 million for the purpose of dedicating funds raised to property tax relief? And the last one, should all medically appropriate assisted reproductive treatments, including but not limited to in vitro fertilization, be covered by insurance plans? Now, again, these are not laws that are being passed. They're just advisory questions on whether the legislature should take up and consider passing these. Also in Illinois,
when did the governor ever worry about what everyone in the state wanted? I thought he only cared about what people in Chicago wanted.
I don't think it's the governor. I think it's special interest that's getting these on the ballot.
Okay, well said. That's a good
Yep.
point of differentiation.
Yep. And then there's a provision whether to include to amend their state Human Rights Act to cover discrimination caused by the use of artificial intelligence. And then lastly, our friends over in Indiana, there is nothing on the ballot this week for you all to consider as it relates to labor and employment issues.
Yeah, Indiana, you gotta love it. I mean, they just play it straight right down the middle. I like the way they approach the business there. Hey, let's talk about this the AI thing just for a second, real quick, Bert. Employers are required, part of what a yes vote would be is that employers would be required to notify employees if AI is being used in employment decisions such as hiring, promotions, discipline. Well, almost all technologies today are using some form of AI for assistance. And I find that one is going to just create a huge mess of, well, it was because of the way AI was programmed. And I can only imagine a court case that's got, programmers in there trying to describe the programming logic is or is not discriminatory in its logic. This one's going to be quite interesting to see what happens with AI.
I agree, and even though the Illinois is considering amending its Human Rights Act to cover discrimination caused by the use of AI, it's probably an unnecessary step.
I see it that way too. It's still discrimination, right?
Exactly.
The employer's still responsible.
That's exactly right. Just because it's AI doesn't mean that you all of a sudden can discriminate. And so under the federal laws,
wash my hands of it.
Yeah, we already have the EEOC taking on this issue as one of its primary issues. And they've already announced that AI cannot discriminate where an employer otherwise can't discriminate.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.